Trace Barnett here with Garden Party, and today we're making chicken dumpling pot pie. What could you love more than like a flaky buttermilk biscuit right on top of ooey gooey chicken dumplings? It's gonna have me clucking. Let's talk cluck. To start this recipe, you're gonna need a whole young chicken, preferably one that can feed roughly around 6 to 8 people. You want to put this in a large stock pot and you want to cover it with 5 to 6 quarts of water. Go ahead and salt that water a little bit. We want it to have a nice salty jacuzzi soak. Bring your water up to a boil and you want to boil that chicken down just until it starts to float. One whole chicken will usually take between 30 and 40 minutes depending on your stovetop. Remove your chicken and allow it to cool. We don't want to burn our little digits here. We have way too much gardening to do this season. So start with your chicken and you want to pull the skin back. I'm gonna reserve that skin because I'm going to add it back to our stock water over there because that's what really holds that good chicken flavor. I also want that residual fat that comes from the skin. It's gonna lend itself to help thicken our dumpling pie shortly. So remove your chicken and just ever so slightly start pulling it apart. Now this is gonna be personal preference here if you want to bite into your dumplings and have a nice bite of chicken there, or if you really want the chicken to almost disappear. And I'm one of those where I love like a big chunk of chicken, so I'm gonna leave mine in just strips like that. It just feels a little more natural. Remove the breast first, and we want to use the whole chicken here. And that's one good thing about using a whole chicken is you have that really good dark meat to utilize. And the dark meat does not dry out as fast when we pop this into the oven as the breast of the chicken would. I know you're laughing at these sound effects. If you don't want to use a raw whole chicken for this and you want to save some time, you can totally use a rotisserie chicken that you bought at your local supermarket or anywhere they have a rotisserie. You can also roast your chicken as well. But I really love to utilize this carcass here, whether or not it's a roast chicken or boiled, because that's where all of the flavor is locked in. That's gonna give us a really good stock. Now that I've picked our chicken here, I'm gonna set this to the side and I'm gonna add that to my stock pot and just return that to a low boil. And just let that simmer away while we also mess with our vegetables and make our biscuits. So now let's add our other accoutrements to our dumpling pot pie here. So you want to start with 4 medium to large carrots, and definitely use your grandmother's best peeler for this. You can never go wrong with those till they break. Remove that peeling, just roughly remove it just like that. And I want to talk about peelings because I'm going to add this peeling into our stock also. So that's really going to give us that depth of flavor that we're looking for. After you've peeled your carrot, of course, remove the ends. And it's really important in this recipe, and I'm one of those that's a very rough chopper, so I love stuff just rustically chopped. But you really want all of your vegetables here uniform in size so that they cook evenly throughout the dish. So I'm just gonna chop that carrot into thirds, and then I'm gonna run my knife through it just like that. Almost think about when you open a can of vegetable soup when you were a child, you want those small little squares. Add that over into our bowl there. Don't add it to my bowl, add it to your bowl. For our celery here, I'm just gonna remove the ends, and I'm also gonna reserve the greens from our celery too, because I'm gonna throw that in our stock shortly as well. Follow the same cutting techniques here, and just roughly chop those uniformly. I don't know if roughly and uniformly go together, but you can infer what I mean there. So now comes the most important part of our entire dish, and that is the buttermilk biscuits that go on top of our chicken dumpling pot pie. If you've never made a biscuit before, this is gonna be the pivotal moment in your life when you really learn how to be a Southerner and how to make the proper biscuit. This is my grandmother's recipe, and I bet that woman made at least 1,000,000 biscuits. I don't remember ever not eating a biscuit at her house, or Murphy, he's the dog. So invest in yourself some parchment paper because that is going to save you some cleanup time. So to start on your biscuits, you will need a large bowl and 2 cups of all-purpose flour. We are not branded by any flour on this show, but your mama and any Southerner in the South knows what brand of flour this is if you really want to make good biscuits. 2 cups of all-purpose flour into your bowl, and I'm going to reserve our flour here and just sprinkle just a little bit directly here. And I'm going to give that a nice spread. That's where we're really going to work our dough shortly. To our flour, throw in 2 tablespoons of baking powder. We really want nice fluffy dumplings within our pot pie, and we really want those good flaky biscuits on top, and we want them to rise just slightly, almost like little pillows you can lay your hungry head on. I'm gonna add in a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and a 1/2 teaspoon of sugar. I like the combo there because it's a little bit of savory, little bit of sweet. Give that a good toss with your hands there and make sure all those dry ingredients are just incorporated together. And this is a really important aspect of this recipe too, and this is really cold butter. Be sure, let your butter hang out in the refrigerator until right before you make your biscuits, and I mean just like momentarily before. You can even pop it into the freezer, and that also will make it a little bit easier to cut. Use a knife, and I'm going to cut our butter into 4ths. It's always so fun to cut on TV, it just never works. Then go just down the middle twice, so it doesn't have to be so technical. We just want, see look, not very technical there. If that happens, just don't slice your finger off and pull it off your knife. What we want are these little bitty squares of butter. This looks like a mess, but trust me, it'll all come apart in the flour. Cut those up and then add that whole stick of butter. Nothing prettier than butter going into something. And dive in once again with your hands. You want to take it and take your hands just like this and work that butter through your fingers into that flour. You want to repeat this until this whole mixture looks just like dry crumbs. You wouldn't want to use a food processor or anything like that because it's going to disperse that butter too much and it's not going to make our biscuits as flaky or as tender. We want nice and fluffy. Work your batter with the butter and dry ingredients just until it reaches that consistency there. If you have children, this is the best job for them. This was my job growing up. This is how I learned to cook, just mixing biscuits together. So just like that, almost just like a fine crumb. I'm a buttermilk believer in biscuits. I know some people will use whole milk. I'm always a buttermilk person. It's just the Southerner in me. It's my inner mama, I guess. You need 3/4 of a cup to a cup of buttermilk. Reserve any that you may have to the side because depending on the temperature, whatever the flour feels like that day, you may need a little bit more. We want enough buttermilk to bring our biscuit dough just together without it being solid or too wet. This is exactly the dough that we're looking for, and this is just a sticky, come-together dough that's not too wet. And this is also a good time to tell you don't over-stir this. Once it comes together, dump it out onto your board and we'll start the magic. When you are working with biscuits, you want to create those nice fluffy layers, whether you're putting it on top of a pot pie or if it's going to be on your breakfast table. With your hands that I've ever so slightly floured, start working that dough out. And I'm going to fold that once that way, and then I'm going to fold it over again that way. Now, you don't want to keep folding, or keep working your dough because that, again, will make a solid, almost like brick of a biscuit rather than those nice, fluffy layers that we're looking for. If I were making these biscuits, say, for a breakfast, I would probably leave them this thickness here, but since we're making a dumpling pot pie here, I am going to get that to about just over 1/4 of an inch in thickness. We want them to rise and be fluffy, but not take over our dish. I don't know any grandmother or any Southerner who actually has a biscuit cutter. You either use an old tin can or the bottom of a glass Today I'm using a glass because my tin can is a little too small. And flour the end of your cup there, and then I'm just gonna go in with my cup here. And of course it's gonna get stuck, but this is how you want it. You'll know the thickness is right because your biscuit will just kind of wave at you. If it does a high five, that's a whole nother thickness. Continue cutting around and make the most of your space. These don't really matter if they're the perfectly round, so I just go right next door to its neighbor, just where they butt up to each other, and cut it out that way. You want to cut out anywhere between 8 to 12 biscuits depending on the amount of people that you're having. Another thing I love about this dumpling pot pie is we don't waste any bits of our biscuit dough here. All these little in-between pieces, that's gonna be the dumplings that go into our pot pie. And now we're ready to move to the stove. Welcome to the stove. Now we are going to saute our vegetable components of our dumpling pot pie here. We want to saute them so they don't have that extra crunch when we bite in to our pie. Now this is very important here. I've had a few tablespoons of olive oil, a couple tablespoons of butter. I've had these just over a medium heat in my pan. And you don't want to take your cold vegetables and pour them into a cold pan filled with cold oil or cold butter. You want to have that little bit of sizzle. The reason being is because if we add that directly into a cold pan, it's gonna make a lot of excess water come out of our vegetables, and nobody wants a watery dumpling pie. A little bit of onion there. And I love to add in fresh whole kernel corn, whether that be frozen. You can also use canned if you've grown corn and canned it through the winter. Now we want to keep this over a medium-high heat, and we're just gonna let these hang out until the onions are translucent and the carrots are soft, as well as the celery. So our vegetables have just cooked down and our carrots are tender. And now's the time to add just a little bit of thickener. This is just raw all-purpose flour, and I'm gonna sprinkle that over top of our vegetables here. You want 3/4 of a cup, half a cup. It's all gonna depend on the thickness that you want your dumplings. I'm gonna give this a stir, and what we're doing here is we don't want raw flour flavor to translate into our dumplings, so we're basically blooming the flour into our vegetables. You can already see by just adding the flour here that the vegetables have started to thicken up. You're basically making like a small roux. I'm stirring this aggressively because you want to be sure there's no lumps of flour hanging out into our vegetables. I'm gonna season this with just a little bit of cumin and a little bit of garlic powder. You can use fresh garlic, but I prefer not to bite into a huge clove of fresh garlic in my chicken and dumplings, but to each their own. Let's add our chicken that we pulled apart earlier directly into our pan, and add 6 cups of chicken stock. And this is the reserve stock that we made from our chicken earlier. Just remove the carcass, skin any impurities off the top, and jar that right up. I'm gonna add that about halfway up to our pan. You want to add your stock in increments because you don't want this so full that it's just sloshing out everywhere as you stir it. I'm gonna turn our heat up just to bring that to a boil before we add our dumplings. I'm gonna season this with a little additional salt and pepper too. My mom always loves like the most pepper that you can put in dumplings or a pot pie, and I have to agree with her on that. If you have dried parsley on hand, now's the time to add it. I refrain from using fresh parsley directly into something that I'm gonna cook down on the stove and then bake because the parsley tends to turn dark. We don't want that dark parsley floating around in our delicious filling. So we've brought our filling for our pot pie here up to a boil. As you can see, it's kind of evenly in a rolling boil. That is, when you stir it, it doesn't stir down. And if you're worried about the thickness, go ahead and do the thickness test here and just run your finger through a spoon. Go ahead and have a little taste. Perfect. If you see that little gap right there in your spoon, then you know it's perfectly thickened up. I'm gonna reduce the heat just a little bit. And if you've made dumplings before, you know that you want your mixture at a boil because we want our dumplings to cook just on the top of our mixture here before we start stirring. If you were to say throw this dumpling into this pot and start aggressively stirring it while you're adding them, they would basically turn into almost like an Elmer glue consistency. They would just disintegrate in the heat. But what we're doing is almost steaming them on top. It's one of my favorite things about this dish is, you know, you have that really good flaky biscuit top, and then you bite into this pot pie filling, and then you have that little secret doughy component in there. Just really fills your mouth with some goodness. So just after a couple minutes, lightly stir and kind of almost fold your dumplings in. You can kind of see they're turning into dumpling consistency here, which is what we want. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the heat off here to our dumplings and just allow them to float around just like that. Take your spoon and even out your pot pie here. And now let's add the biscuits directly on top. These are all these good cat head biscuits, so that's what they used to call them if they were the size of cat heads. And that's what you would want to send your man off or whomever was working in your house back in the old days with a cat head biscuit, because it would be enough to sustain them as they were out working. And I do not let my biscuits completely touch in this recipe. I like seeing all those really pretty colors there. That's the beauty about this dish, is you don't have to worry about making that hard pie crust that's so hard to make for pot pies. I'm gonna give this a little sprinkle of pepper directly on top. And we're ready to go into a 425-degree oven. You want to roughly cook this for 25 to 30 minutes, just about the same time you would cook a biscuit. The biscuits will puff up and they will have a really pretty golden top, and then you'll know this is ready to come out. And now comes the hard part of waiting. So now that our chicken dumpling pot pie is all ooey gooey, our biscuits are perfectly flaked on top. Let's add a little bit of fresh parsley just for some color, a little bit of flavor. Let this dish kind of set around for a few minutes, like 5 to 10 minutes. Let everything kind of mellow out in there, and then comes the best part. Serve this up. Serve some bird. The great thing about this recipe is it's really good for portion control also, because one large biscuit is a serving. So look at that beautiful. It's just like award-winning right there. And there you have it. It's a perfect marriage of two Southern classic dishes, all hidden under a biscuit. What could be better? Happy clucking. You'd think I would prepare to do this. Is a chicken caretaker called a chicken tender? I guess especially if they're extra crispy like I look in the summer. For more recipe ideas and gardening tips in a swanky Southern way, like, comment, and subscribe. I'm gonna have another dumpling here. Whoa, God. I love how I clear my throat every time for dramatic purposes. Drop us a line and leave us a comment and let us know how your chicken dumpling pot pie turned out. So that's the perfect fitness. It's the perfect fitness. It's perfect fitness. It's the perfect thickness for this recipe.